Let's get into main topic number 1. And our first main topic today gets submitted to us by Greg Thurston. And Greg Thurston writes, "Hey, John and Rob, the great Sean Connery has passed away. It's funny because just the other day, some friends of mine and I were talking about how much we'd love to see him do another film. What are your favorite performances in films of the great Sean Connery?" All right, thanks a lot for sending that in. And yeah, Rob, it was after Friday's show that I had received news that the immortal, amazing Sean Connery had indeed passed away. Well, one of the very first films, real Hollywood movies that I got to, in an auxiliary way, got to be a part of was when I was working at a CGI special effects company, and we were working on some shots for his final film, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. We did the Invisible Man on Fire shot, just so people know. There you go. That's our connection to that. He is truly one of the all-time greats to ever do it, with a screen presence that can only be described as, you have to mention, when you're talking about Sean Connery and screen presence, you have to include him with the likes of James Earl Jones, or with the likes of an Arnold Schwarzenegger. Just the sheer presence and the power of personality that he would bring on screen. Only on top of all that, you add, in the case of Schwarzenegger, an incredible pedigree of talent. One of the most talented guys who could always step in. If you needed somebody to be a badass, all you had to do is go to Sean Connery. The passing of Sean Connery comes 14 years after his retirement from the business. It's been a long time since we got to see the great one in any films, and that's a shame. But he has left us with a legacy, a catalog of where any 1/10 of his catalog would be considered a great career for almost anybody else on their own. And what Sean Connery did, even beyond Bond. And that's the funny thing here, Rob. When we talk about Sean Connery, obviously the first thought goes to Bond, right? And we think about all the great Bond stuff. And certainly for the last 3 days, a lot of people have been espousing a lot of platitudes about the greatness of Sean Connery's Bond. Absolutely. But I thought I'd want to take a little bit of a different approach here today, Rob. I want to take it a slightly different approach. I wanted to talk today about my favorite non-Bond Sean Connery things, because the greatness of Sean Connery went way beyond Bond. And again, I get it. I get it that our first place our mind goes is the Bond. Justifiably so, rightfully so. But he was so much more than that. And I wanted to talk about my 5 favorite Sean Connery films in no particular order. This isn't a top 5, but I want to talk about my 5 favorite Sean Connery films here, Rob, that are not Bond related. Then I want to get some of your favorites. I'm going to start with the best Indiana Jones movie they ever made, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, coming in as Indiana Jones's dad. I love this movie. I love Sean Connery in this movie. Like, quite often when you have a franchise that is centered around one character, I don't want other characters trying to take some of that spotlight away. Sean Connery as the elder Professor Jones just kills it. And the dynamic between him and Harrison Ford was fantastic. And just the passion he put into it when he was funny when he needed to be. He was awe-inspiring, like when he was talking about the Grail. When he had to be a little aloof, he was a little aloof. One of my favorite scenes of all time, Rob, actually, in any movie, is that simple little shot of him running down the beach with the umbrella, getting the birds to fly up into the air, right? I love that. And he quotes, and I love him in this. So one of the things I'm going to go with is another one is Untouchables. Rob, Sean Connery has some of the greatest single lines of all time, but one of my all-time favorite lines in any movie, as an Italian, is, "Leave it to a wop to bring a knife to a gunfight." It's like one of the great all-time lines of all time. Untouchables, by the way, is truly a magnificent film that I think we don't talk nearly enough about. But Sean Connery in that, so good, so fantastic. That's the Chicago way. I mean, come on. It's so great. So one is Last Crusade, one is Untouchables. And how can I not talk about one of my top 10 favorite films of all time, The Highlander, where he played the immortal Ramirez, who instructed Connor McLeod in the ways of being an immortal and how to ultimately, near the end, defeat the Kurgan. I mean, it is one of my all-time favorite films. It's ridiculous that this Scottish dude playing a Spaniard, I still don't really get it. It's fine, but I don't care because it's Sean Connery. So I'm going to go with the Highlander. Another one I've got to go with. This is a little bit of a guilty pleasure of mine, but I talk about it a lot. Michael Bay's The Rock that he did with Nicolas Cage. I unabashedly, unreservedly love this movie. And we were talking about some of the greatest lines of all time. Rob, you're starting to allude to at the beginning. Your best. Losers whine about their best while winners go home and fuck the prom queen. I mean, that's just something only Sean Connery can say. Only Sean Connery can say that and get away with it. It was fun. It was exciting. Sean Connery was a badass in it. I absolutely love The Rock. I said this was in no particular order, but Sean Connery in Hunt for Red October. This is another one of those movies like Untouchables, which I just consider one of the all-time great films. It is still, to me, with all the great Jack Ryan stuff we've had, whether it's the new series that's out there on Amazon or whether it's, Patriot Games or Clear and Present Danger, whatever, nothing will ever top Hunt for Red October. And Sean Connery is that X factor to me that puts it on that pedestal. Sam Neill was fantastic in it too. I would have liked to have seen Montana. Great lines, great moments. But Hunt for Red October, that's a movie I watch every year. At least once a year, I watch Hunt for Red October. It's absolutely fantastic. And Sean Connery, again, this dude with his heavy Scottish accent, just totally convinced me he was a Russian naval captain. He just totally convinced me he was a Russian naval captain. I love this movie. So again, just a couple of them for me, again, in no necessarily particular order. My favorites of his are Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Untouchables, Highlander, where he plays Ramirez, The Rock, and Hunt for Red October. Rob, I mean, there's others. There's many others that we could talk about and mention here, Rob, but those are the ones that just happen to stick out to me when I think about the greatness of Sean Connery. Rob, when you think about Connery, beyond the immortal work he did as James Bond, what are some of the things that come to your mind?
Well, I mean, we both agree. I'll start by intersecting with your list. Hunt for Red October is one of my favorite movies of all time. And in terms of being an action-adventure story, being a naval story, an ensemble cast, one of the great ensemble casts. I can't believe the movie's 30 years old. And I love Connery in it as Ramirez. He's, did I say Ramirez? I didn't mean, as Marco Ramius, he's one of the great characters. I just love him so much. But I'm going to go back and talk about Connery's past. I mean, he's been around. I mean, he worked with Hitchcock. He starred in Marnie, Hitchcock's Marnie, where he was also dealing with a crazy wife. And to work with the master, I mean, for Hitchcock to have cast right in the middle, Marnie came out in the same year as Goldfinger did. So Connery had done 2 Bond films, and then the third film came out the same year as Marnie. Goldfinger came out the same year as Marnie. That was a huge deal for him, and to work with someone like Hitchcock, amazing. Now, a movie that I have a great fondness for is John Borman's 1974 batshit crazy science fiction epic Zardoz. Now, he plays Zed, an enforcer, one of the brutals in a future where humanity, most of humanity, is living in this brutal countryside, and the rest of the world is a terrible place, but it's being presided over by these immortals. Charlotte Rampling is one of them, and who doesn't want to be anywhere where young Charlotte Rampling is? I mean, if you've never seen Zardoz, look at that outfit. The fact that Sean Connery would wear that this was his costume. God love the man. As my girlfriend Elizabeth says, even in this movie, his package is wrapped up in a bow in this outfit. It's an incredible movie. It's amazing. Then I want to jump forward and talk about In the Name of the Rose, which Jean-Jacques Annaud directed the film. It is a mystery It is an incredible performance. It's a period piece. It's amazing. And again, he was terrific in it as a friar that's investigating criminals. Yes, and that is a young Christian Slater there. But I think the very best movie that Sean Connery was ever in, and it's one of my favorite films of all time, is John Huston's 1975 Rudyard Kipling adaptation, The Man Who Would Be King, that he is in with Michael Caine, about two British former officers, military men that find themselves in a land that hasn't seen white men since Alexander the Great was there, and their odyssey of what they decide to do. Just an incredible movie. And this film, if you've never seen it, it's essential viewing. If you love movies, this is a movie for movie lovers, and it's a movie for Sean Connery lovers, and he's incredible. And, he's done so many other films. Like, I love Philip Kaufman's adaptation of Michael Crichton's Rising Sun that he was in. Of course, Peter Hyams' 1981 film Outland, where he's on Jupiter's moon Io. He's the only law. It's a science fiction riff on High Noon, which is incredible. I even liked him in John McTiernan's Medicine Man, which is...
I'll tell you what, I actually thought Medicine Man was kind of underrated. It's got this, I love movies that give you great moral dilemmas. And for those of you who haven't seen the film, so near the end of the film, Sean Connery faces this, Sophie's Choice, he faces this terrible, terrible decision he has to make. There is a native woman that is dying, and he could save her without giving all the details of the movie away. He could save her, but saving her would mean using the last batch of something that could go on to save millions of people. Or does he let this woman die and it's just, the way Connery plays that dilemma is so great. I'm so glad you mentioned Medicine Man, because I thought that was a great movie.
Yeah, and there's one of my favorite guilty pleasures of all time is the movie, if you love Deep Impact and you love Armageddon, if you haven't seen the late 70s movie Meteor, which is, Natalie Wood and Sean Connery, and it's just like, it's 1979. Man, it has all kinds of miniature effects that look like you could have put them together yourself. But I loved Meteor, and it's just about, it's exactly what you'd think. It's a precursor to Armageddon. Look, there's Martin Landau. This cast is, let me just lay out this cast for you, because it's kind of amazing. Sean Connery, Natalie Wood, Carl Malden, Brian Keith, Martin Landau, Trevor Howard, Henry Fonda. It's this cast is BB Besh, Dr. Carol Marcus from Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. This is one of those big, giant disaster epics of the 70s that's not great. But let me tell you, when Sean Connery comes on the screen and starts talking with his Scottish brogue, it just makes everything better. And when the Americans and the Russians team up with their secret, each one has a secret nuclear missile platform in orbit that the other doesn't know about. When they team up and face their missiles, not at the Earth anymore, but they turn them around to fire and launch at the incoming meteor, I'm telling you, you will feel your heart quicken. The beat will quicken.
Please
Meteor.
don't say anything that sounds like The Quickening when it comes to Sean Connery movies, please. That's great. Guys, the question is for you. Obviously, and understandably and rightfully so, our mind first goes to Bond, obviously. But, beyond Bond, Sean Connery is truly one of the greats of all time. What are your favorite things of his? Maybe there's one that we already mentioned. Maybe there's a couple we didn't mention that you want to talk about. Jump on down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right, guys.